Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Today on the podcast, my guest is Stephanie Treece. Stephanie is a former nuclear submarine officer like myself. In fact, she was one of the first women ever to serve on U.S. Navy submarines. Her view on leadership is very unique, and you need to hear what she has to say. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to episode 12 of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Stephanie Treece. Stephanie was one of the first women to serve as an officer on nuclear submarines. She was the Reactor Controls Officer and later the Damage Control Officer on the USS Florida, a nuclear-powered guided missile submarine. She is a qualified submariner and a qualified Navy nuclear engineer. I'm excited to talk to her and learn about her unique leadership experience. So Stephanie, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So it's great to have you. Walk us through your journey to become a submarine officer. What sparked the interest for you, and when did you discover it was something you really wanted to do?
Sure. So I kind of tell my backstory, looking into college. I think everybody, in the millennial age can kind of understand this concept of looking for a way to pay for school. And so that's how I got into the Navy at first, right? So I said, okay, what are options? Oh, hey, there's a Navy scholarship and they give you a job afterwards. Win-win. Highly recommend that for everybody to do. But so went to Penn State. At that time, I didn't have a lot of background in the Navy and what was and wasn't open for me as far as a career goes. But they do this summer training for midshipmen. So after my freshman year, I went and I got to go on a surface ship and I got to go on fly airplanes and I got to go on a submarine for a day. And it was the USS Newport News. Nice. And we went out and I don't know what it was. I just fell in love with it. The guys were they're just so technically minded and they're just so smart. And there was this brotherhood there. It was such a tight-knit community. And one of the things, and this is, no offense to any other, branch of the Navy because everyone is wonderful there to serve. But, for me, growing up in a very blue-collar society, because I was becoming an officer, I still struggled with the whole rank separation, who's in charge of whom. Yes. And in submarines, the best thing about it is dolphins on your chest, yes. Right? It's all about being qualified. Yes. And so that was the thing that just resonated with me is like you prove yourself on that platform, I think the most. So that's why I just, really wanted submarines. And I came back and said, oh, I love submarines. And they were like, oh, bad news.
Yeah, there's a problem.
You can't go.
Stephanie, there's a problem. We haven't told you yet.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, what's similar, right? What can I do that's similar? And it's funny because my degree is in aerospace engineering. Mm-hmm. So people are like, oh, you're going to be a pilot.
Right.
No, I just think space is cool. So I wanted to have some education there. But I went for my SWO nuke, surface nuclear option. And I did that the whole way through. And then there was a lot of buzz end of my junior year that Congress was having conversations about opening submarines up. And I was like, oh, it could happen, say a couple prayers at night, this could be the thing. And I went out on the Henry M. Jackson, which, how they do with midshipmen. They send you on the best tours, the funnest tours. So they dropped us off in Pearl Harbor and we went out. The whole thing. So, again, just loved it. Different platform, obviously. It was a boomer. So, but man, same experience, just great people. So when I got back, did my nuclear officer interview, still SWO nuke because it wasn't open. Right. But I did mention to the Admiral in our final interview, hey, jot me down. put me under subs if you can. So they called me back about a month later and said, yeah, we opened it up. Come back down and interview for a sub spot. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And that was what year was that?
So I got the call in 2010. I commissioned in May of 2011. And then I went to sub school in the fall of 2011.
Wow. So this is the very early days of women allowed on submarines, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I always try to be clear, because the first group of women, they selected 12 and that was my senior year. So I was in the second round of 12 that would have hit the fleet. So there's 12 in front of me. And I always say it's better. I think some people maybe would be like, oh man, I just missed it by a year. But for me, I just wanted it to be the hype of it to be done. So that I could do the work.
Yes.
I was just grateful to those women to be like, and some of them, I know, talk to, friends of mine and they are just phenomenal. But some of the things that they've experienced and had to go through, I'm grateful for them because that was less that I had to do.
Right. But you're still in that early, even to be in the second wave, it's still you're still someone, it's still a new thing. It's still something that the fleet isn't used to because there's a lot of senior enlisted that they've been 20 years in the Navy. and now even in the first year, there's now a change in the way things are done. And change is hard for people in anything. So
yeah, and it's interesting too to note that when you talk about the first women, so the first women selected, I was not in the first women selected, I was in the second group. But when I showed up to my boat, there weren't any women there.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. So what was that experience like? So when you first got to the Florida, what was it like to be a new officer? First of all, I've been through that experience, right? You show up and you're clueless, all right? I'm just going to say that. You're clueless.
You are, 100%.
You don't have dolphins on your chest. You're not qualified. You do not. It's a big boat, right?
It is.
It's really impressive. And you don't even know where your rack is, right? And you show up. So what was that experience like showing up as a new officer? And I'll answer that question too, is how many women are on board when you showed up?
So, Florida has 2 crews. Okay. So there are 3 women on Gold crew. And then we were the first, my friend Liz and my friend Shannon, we were the first women on the Blue crew. Okay. So when we showed up to the ship, I, have to say one of the best things was that I had become really good friends with Elizabeth Minahan through Power School, right? We were both the engineering officers that were on Florida Blue. And just having each other support when you get there, just to have a buddy. To be like,
big time.
Okay,
like, what do I do now? Where do I go?
Well, I always used to tell the joke when I was on board. It's like, well, if there's not more than one woman, how will we ever go to the bathroom? We need someone to go with. That was always the joke, that they say women go and powder their nose together.
That's right. Exactly.
But no, it was, I would say, and I'm grateful to the Florida leadership and the crew for this. It was for me, and I guess it's hard for me to say because I wasn't a man who's done it, so I don't have a good comparison. But for me, I felt there weren't a lot of times when I first got there that I felt like, oh, I'm a woman on submarines. You know what I mean? Okay. It felt very organic. You show up, you don't know what you're doing. You rely on everybody to help you. And you have pretty much zero respect regardless of what's on your collar because you're not qualified.
Exactly right. Yeah. Nobody cares.
As it should be.
Right.
As it should be.
Right. It's a merit-based culture, right? You have to perform, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing I love about it most. But I guess maybe the only thing that was different is just, and I always laugh about this. There was preparation for the crew before we came, right? So like you said, when you showed up, likely nobody pulled the whole crew together and said, right, okay, here we go. John's going to show up. What are we going to do?
Right. So there was like a hush when you walked in a room, like, oh, what is that? She's here. This is the one they talked about. Right. Yeah. So, so that adds a whole nother element of, that's why I thought that'd be interesting to talk to you because it adds a whole nother element to coming in and trying to be a new leader. So one is that you're new and you don't know anything. That's one, and it's difficult enough, right? But then
for everyone,
and then being something that is unique, that's never, that many of the crew hadn't experienced before, and that's a whole nother avenue. So it made, I would imagine, early on, it made it much more difficult in terms of just trying to. When you walk in a room and every head turns and you're like, oh, well, okay, I got to deal with this as well. So, because sometimes I don't know, were you an ensign or a JG at the time or?
Yeah, I think I wasn't. Now I'm trying to think. I can't remember because it would have been close. I can't remember if I put on JG right before I got aboard, or if I was still an ensign and got my JG on board. But it was right around that time frame.
Right.
I want to say that maybe I had just pinned JG before I got there.
But I know as an ensign, when I was an ensign, I wanted to hide. I didn't want anyone to know where I was because I was clueless and I just wanted to get out of the way. I don't want to be in the way.
Give me an RPM. Let me read it.
Right. Exactly.
I'll stay in the back. I think the biggest challenge was just breaking down people's preconceived notions and things that maybe that they were told. A lot of it stemmed around fearfulness about sexual harassment. And there's not, and I would say even now, society as a whole has work to do about what it means to work respectfully with women and where that line is. And it's weird. For me as a woman, I feel like I'm a person. I know where the line is. You can, I can tell a dirty joke or you can, and we're okay depending on, how you know a person. But it's clear that line is very hazy for a lot of people. And so when people are scared, they defer to, okay, I had a guy one time. I don't know if this makes you laugh. I had a guy one time that was walking down the missile compartment, okay? Yeah. And it's all, just rows and rows and rows of huge missile tubes.
Which level?
I was third level.
Okay.
Right, okay. So so I'm walking along and I see him and he's way at the end of the hall. And I go, I'm just walking normal, and he ducks in between the missile tubes so that he doesn't have to pass me.
Oh.
Right, because he's afraid that he's going to get too close to me. Right. And so these were sorts of little things. So, of course, I just commented like, you can walk past me. It's okay.
So basically they didn't even know how to react. They in a way, they were trying to overreact versus just being comfortable around another person.
Yeah. And that's not their fault. Right. Because they were set up in that way. I think everyone's trying to be, err on the side of caution.
Right.
Let's just feel this out and see how it goes. And I think some people were just like, okay, I'm not going to be the guy.
I'm not getting in trouble.
I'm not, exactly. Right. So just like you said, when you're an ensign, like, I just want to hide. Like, I'm not going to do this. But, to me, it was all about just breaking down, kind of the preconceived notions, things that maybe they were afraid of, and just saying, look, I'm a person, we respect each other mutually and we're a team. So that was the only challenge I think maybe you had to overcome, maybe more so.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. That's like I said, it's a whole nother, it's a whole nother side of the Rubik's Cube that you have to deal with coming in and doing this difficult job. So this is interesting. So I started my first job as a Reactor Controls Officer as well, and that was your first.
Oh, nice.
So I wanted to ask you what that experience was like. So you go back in the engine room, and for me at least, I met my team in Instrument Alley for the first time. And so I got a chance to meet them, understand what they did. And the first thing I noticed is that they were an extremely experienced group of sailors, and we had a chief petty officer at the time too. Extremely talented, extremely experienced. And I was a ensign. I was a nobody, right? I had just showed up the boat. I'd been to Nuke Power School and Prototype and Sub School, but pretty much that's all I had. So tell me about your experience. How did you lead as a young officer? How did you lead an experienced team? And what was your experience like?
So I think, and this is across the board for anyone in leadership. And I find, interestingly enough, that when people get further away from being a new leader and building their repertoire and their concepts and everything that they know, they sometimes lose this idea. It's about teamwork. And I say that in not like kind of a hashtag kind of way, but I guess I see being a leader, you're just another member of the team who brings a specific skill set.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So,
have you read my book? Because that's I talk about that all the time.
No, I haven't, but I will. But yeah, but that's the most important thing. And I get it. In the military, there are levels where people rank wise are stacked, right, in a linear type way.
Right.
But when you're on the deck plate with the guys and you have a chief who has so much experience, and then you have an LPO with a lot of experience, and they both have, amazing things that you can learn from their leadership and their knowledge. The goal is to come to that team and say, what can I contribute? Right. It's that servant leadership concept that It's a buzzword, but like I really truly believe. And that's all I really did. I got to know the sailors. All right. So for people who maybe don't know, when you come on board, I learned S5W reactor, right? That's an old reactor. Right. It has nothing to do with the reactor that I was going to be. Exactly. If you want to say in charge, I was never in charge of the reactor, but you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yes,
I'm
absolutely.
in charge of. And so really what it boiled down to, so what's my skill set I'm bringing, right? I can support the sailors. I have the resources that they need on a personal level, right, to support them through whatever they have to go through so they can be focused on mission. I am the conduit to the upper leadership. So how do I work that relationship with my chief and LPO so that I'm effectively communicating their needs? Because in that Navy structure, that's whom speaks, right, is the divo. So it's all about finding your kind of your niche and where you fit into your team instead of being like, okay, I'm in charge of you now, because you're just not, and no leader should really see themselves in that way. Right.
Well, and I think you touched on it. There are certain things that only the leader can do. There's certain things that only the officer can do. And you're that conduit. You're also, though, taking care of, like you said, supporting them, making sure that they have what they need so they can carry out the mission. And the chief can't do that, and the leading petty officer can't do that. That's your job as an officer. Part of that is that there's certain things that only you can do. Exactly.
Just like in the same way, I cannot open a cabinet and do maintenance. Right. Right.
Exactly. A coach doesn't climb on the field and play basketball with his team. Right.
Exactly.
They're in that. They're in the role to coach and show and do bigger picture kind of things. Right.
Exactly. So we all brought things to the table.
You all had a different role to do. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So explain, this is interesting to me because you're my first submariner I've interviewed. So explain to me the qualification process on board, and what was that like for you, and how did that help you become a better officer and a better leader? And you can explain going through the qualification program and getting your dolphins and what that meant.
Yeah. So I had kind of a unique situation, because when I showed up to Florida, we took her back out to sea for a short stint, and then we pulled into dry dock and started refit. Okay, so when we got aboard, it was okay, how are we going to get these new officers qualified with the constraints that we have with refit, and not having a potential for sea time. So what that looked like is getting as much of the sea time operational stuff done when we first got aboard, when we were pulling out and just doing some work out at sea. And then when we pulled back into port, on the engineering side, leveraging on the simulators and trainers.
Okay.
And then when we got to the forward, portion of the qualifications, they sent us out to ride the USS Michigan on the West Coast.
Okay.
And so that's pretty standard. You normally get, riders who come in, and that was cool for me.
We had riders too when we, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because, ships, they rotate out, who's going to be important, and you have to keep the fleet prepared and qualified. So that was kind of just broadly how my qualifications went. So I got qualified through engineering on Florida. I went over to Michigan, worked on my qualifications for contact manager and, officer of the deck. And then I came back to Florida and officially got those pretty much all in one kind of interview, and then got my dolphins at the end. So I guess it's one of those things I think would be great for, corporations to take on when they break.
Yes.
It's
exactly what I say too a lot, is that there was a very unique experience because there was a very clear, so you're a new employee. Think of it as you're a new employee. You show up to a ship and you have to, and there's a process for, if you're going to stand this watch, if you're going to do this duty, you have to go through all of these elements of proving that you can do these various tasks, these various things. And so when you get to that, you're not experienced, but you have done a bare minimum amount of effort, and you've proven yourself to be able to be worthy to take that next level.
Yeah. And I would say, additionally to that, what it did is it broke down barriers for me, right? The barriers we talked about when I first got on board, it broke down those barriers for me because, and for maybe people who are listening who don't know, you get a packet, right? And it's got all of the things you're going to do, take a sample, whatever it is. And so you get to interact with the crew members one-on-one. And so they can, so many times when I'm doing, because they'll ask you questions and you do checkouts and they'll sign, at that time, that was when they felt comfortable asking me questions or getting to know me on that level. So I think it was really, to my advantage in that process to get one-on-one time with the whole crew and sit down and say, okay, what do you do? Right? What is your job like? And that's why I would love to see corporate, structures take that on. Now, I was blessed because I came into my current company, Submarine, as a quality engineer, and my team there, they were very much in that vein. And actually my supervisor was a former quartermaster on a submarine. So he set me up I sat down with every single functional group, I sat with the receiving clerk, saw what she did. I sat with, our inspectors and our engineers, and I learned what everybody did. And that just helps you break down those barriers where you feel siloed. And say, okay, how can we support each other? And if you understand what the other person's doing. So I think, the submarine community has it right with qualifications. I think that that's how you forge, just really, really good submariners and then ultimately really good employees,
Is having that basic knowledge and getting a chance to meet everybody and having that interaction. So it's important.
Thanks for listening to Deep Leadership. We'll be right back after a brief intermission.
Hey, leaders. If you're anything like me, you drink coffee to power through your morning. But what about in the afternoon? For me, I start getting a little sleepy and unfocused around 2 p.m. So I like to do something to get me recharged and refocused. I've tried a bunch of different energy drinks. I've even tried that stuff that's supposed to last 5 hours. Most are expensive and cause you to crash later in the afternoon. I was introduced to a really good product by a fellow veteran. He told me to try Strikeforce Energy. Strikeforce is a veteran-owned company founded by a Navy SEAL, and their products are all made in the USA. Strikeforce Energy is a liquid flavor pack that you can add to any beverage. It has 0 calories, 0 carbs, and 0 sugar. Each pack contains 80 milligrams of caffeine. I actually add 2 packs and a liter of water in the afternoon. I get my water, my energy, and the great taste of Strikeforce throughout the afternoon. I personally prefer the original flavor. Strikeforce Energy is offering a discount to all the listeners of Deep Leadership. Go to strikeforceenergy.com and enter the discount code I have the watch, one word, I have the watch, for a 20% discount on your order. Strikeforce Energy, fuel for your fight. One thing I saw in the interview, the write-up that was in Task and Purpose, that website, they said you said something in that article which I thought was good. It said, You talked about the importance of showing up, being present, being yourself, and being authentic. Why are those important for leadership?
Well, I think a lot of times people think, oh, leaders are untouchable.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had some leaders in my life that acted that way. And I think that it's ineffective. And, even just as a person, and I truly do think that every person can be a leader. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what your role is. Leadership isn't about authority. Okay. It's not about what role you have in your company or what role you have on the ship. And I learned this in submarines early on. I'm on the con, I'm the officer of the deck. We're on mission. I'm,
right.
Whatever in charge if you want to. But at the end of the day, that, third class petty officer sitting at the sonar stack is going to save my life.
Right.
And so that's, to me, it's being authentic and showing that you're fallible mm-hmm. is important, right? So I hope that if you talk to anybody on my watch team, they would say, yeah, Stephanie owns up to her mistakes. Mm-hmm. Stephanie's a little bit weird, a little bit silly. And I feel like that breaks down barriers to allow people to give you the important feedback that you need. I mean, there's no, system out there that operates well without feedback, right? You think about just, a basic motor, right? To run it effectively, through a controller, you need feedback to know where it's at and what it's doing. So I guess that's really where it stems from, is just being who you are and finding out how you can better serve the team that you're on. That's leadership. Right. And so, and I guess the second layer to that, and just speaking, because when I was giving the speech, I was speaking to a group of women, is that a lot of times there's this thought that, well, you'll be successful if you do it the way a man would do it.
Interesting.
Like, oh, well, women tend not to speak up in boardroom meetings, but men do, so they get more attention. So you need to speak up more in boardroom meetings. But I would challenge that concept and say, no, you need to find out how you can be effective in the way that you communicate, or else it comes off artificial.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Well, it's almost like, we're going through coronavirus situation right now, and I've been watching how some leaders have been handling it with their people, and the authentic leaders are communicating directly with their people and seeing how they're doing and making sure they understand what's going on. They don't know all the answers, but they're trying to, they're being present and they're helping their people through this difficult time. And then I see the ones that are trying to be fake, and they're sending out these long emails about what they can and cannot do and who they're going to. And it's almost like they don't have a relationship, and they don't have, and they're not authentic. They're kind of trying to be like a fake version of a leader. They're trying to be a plastic, leader. And the thing is, leaders, we're not plastic people, right? We're people, and we have relationships. And I think what you're saying is that we have to have those authentic relationships with the people that work with us.
Yeah. And I think, kind of what you're describing, and, no offense to anyone who considers themselves this, but what you're describing is a manager or management.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
To manage, you need to put it clearly, concisely, black and white out on the street. This is the policy. But to lead is to put people at ease, to understand what they're going through, and to help them through those challenges. And I'll say, at Par Marine and Par Systems at large, our CEO, he put out a recorded voice message, because they're located, up north. So it's a little bit, and we're in Georgia. So, we're a little bit, have a gap, but he sent out, just a succinct, just really great voice message to everyone in their email that you click it. You can hear what he has to say. Starts off with just talking about family and how he cares about us. And so that's, just encouraging to see in the corporate, world as well, that people do really care, and we have really good leaders out there. That's
good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Because I've seen a mix. I did 22 years in corporate America, and I saw a mix of people that really cared and those that didn't care, or that struggled to understand about caring. So
no, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. But
I think it might have been in the same speech you gave, but I read this online and I thought this was interesting. You said, I'm using your quotes to you.
Uh-oh.
So you're famous now. I found this online. It says,
oh, yeah, that was by accident, by the way.
Yes, I know. You said leadership is much more than shouting out orders. It's about showing empathy and love. And I actually have a whole chapter of that in my book. And Donald Miller said this. He said, great leaders aren't afraid to love their teams. So this is interesting because, as you just said, managers manage, leaders lead. And I think that you've touched on something here in what you said in that speech. So why is this so important in leadership, to love your team?
So I guess, it started off for me just being obvious in that JO role on submarines, right? Because that is a type of job. And some people, sometimes when you tell them this, they don't believe you. But I mean, genuinely, even in port, somebody is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Christmas, Thanksgiving, it doesn't matter. And your whole role that you bring to the table as a junior officer, because you're not as technically savvy as the people who you are supposed to be leading, is that personal side, right? So you have to genuinely care about the people who are going through things like, how do you keep somebody on task when they're going through a custody battle for their children, right? You have to care about that person at a certain level to help support them and put in the effort it takes. How do you care about a person who has, starts to pull away from the group if you don't actively go out there and grab them by the shirt and pull them in and say, why are you backing yourself out here? And they say, well, I felt really isolated. I feel depressed. And then this is where you step in. That's the time. You will not be effective if you don't genuinely care about what happens to the people on your team. And even if, to boil it down to a more, I guess, black and white type conversation for people who are analytical like that, people are your biggest resource in business, right? And so if I see sometimes, investments in, we need more welding machines, right? Because they're wearing out. But where is that replenishment for the people who do the welding? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so that's really where you have to bring that kind of concept in. And it's so important to actually care about your people because they're your biggest asset. And frankly, if you are managing, right, you end up not being effective. You're just not going to be effective because you're going to say, you need to do this. And they are so overwhelmed with their mother passing away that they can't do the things you're directing them to do.
Yes. Yeah.
And so and you build trust that way too, right? Because leadership is a relationship. Right. So how do you have a good relationship? Read it in any book. They're going to say trust. How do you build trust? Right. Extend the hand out and you say, I care about you and the decisions I have to make. Because sometimes you have to make hard decisions, right? You have a division of people and you got to talk to your chief and say, okay, who we picking for Christmas dinner? Right. Who's going to miss it with their family? We got to know. That's a hard decision. Oh, we're about to go to sea. Everybody's planning on seeing their families before we go. Something breaks. We have to stay late and we have to roll right into deployment. Who's staying? And if your team knows that you love them, regardless of the hard decisions you have to make, people might not be happy about it, but they know that you did it, with their best intent at heart. Right?
Yeah. No, that's great. That's really good. I really appreciate that because we don't see it as much. I mean, I have an MBA, right? I went to business school. Yeah. You never hear the word love mentioned. You never hear the word about caring. Sometimes they call it soft skills, right? Oh, those are soft skills. Really? Actually, then why are they so hard for leaders to do in a lot of cases?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So that's good. I like what you just said. Leadership is a relationship and you can't take a cookie cutter approach to leadership. Every person's important. Every person is led differently, managed differently. So you have to know them. If you don't know them, how can you manage them? So how can you deal with them? So that's really good. What advice, let me ask you another question. What advice would you give to new leaders? Someone that just maybe recently got promoted. They're now in a leadership role. They have a small team working for them? How can they become an effective leader?
I'd say step one, feedback, right? Right off the gate, you do not want to put up an air of, I know best, listen to me, right? And you've probably been a part of watch teams where maybe that was the case where, somebody's, all communications go through me, right? And we've seen in some mishap reports where the guy at the lowest level knew the right answer and he couldn't get it to the leader, he couldn't get it to the decision makers.
Right.
And so I'd say, step one, you need to just foster that open communication, that feedback. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I just wanted to tell you the way that you said that in the meeting was a bit harsh, right? Put down your offense, right? Just put it aside. Just get away from being defensive and really take that on. And even if you don't agree with it, that's okay. Not everybody's opinion is factual, but perception is reality. I used to hate that term, but now I've really embraced it because it just speaks to, you need to figure out why do they feel that way and what can I do to bring them on board. So that'd be step one. And then I guess, step two is you don't want to come into a new group. Let's say you're, a new CEO, right? One of the things you can tell, and you've probably seen this, you get a new captain, right? And you can tell if they're going to be a good captain, and this is going to shock people, but if they don't change anything for the first 3 months, they're going to be a good captain.
Yes.
Right?
Have you read my articles?
They changed nothing because it's so important to see. And just like we talked about, everybody's different. Everyone's unique. Just because it worked at your old company doesn't mean it's going to work at your new company, right? Because there are so many layers to a human being about, what were their upbringing? What are their experiences? How do they react to, given direction? How do they react to constructive criticism? All those things come into play. So when you get there, you just sit back, get your notebook out, write down the things that you may want to tackle, and then start asking questions about those, learn those things. And then, within the first 3 to 6 months, just play low key, learn what's going on, and then, execute a plan. And I guess maybe the third thing besides, start building that trust with your people and, don't change anything, bulldoze right at the beginning is, really you need to have a vision. You need to have a vision because people, they may say, oh, I know what my job is. So especially in the corporate world, because roles are so clearly defined, right? On submarines, as you know, right? Hi, I'm the DCA. Oh, but I'm also doing operational safety and I'm also in charge of,
collateral duties,
all the collateral duties. And I'm the wardroom party guy. Right. And also, I'm a firefighter, right? When it hits the fan. So that's a concept that is less so in corporate life. But I don't know, at the end of the day, it's about giving people a compass with which they can measure their decisions off of. Right. So this is our clear statement. I've seen crazy mission statements. I've seen crazy vision statements, but it's got to be something that people can repeat, something that somebody could put on their desk. And when they are by themselves and they need to make a decision, they need to make the right decision, and they should be empowered to do so because that's what good leadership is. The lowest level makes a decision. They look at the thing, the vision statement you put out, and they can make that choice quickly. Right. 4 words.
I always say a vision you should say, be able to communicate that in 4 words. And if you can do that every day with your employees and they know, and you give them the authority to make decisions at the lowest level, and then they know the guiding principles, then they're going to make the right decision every time. And then the whole organization moves in the same direction. And you just nailed on just about everything I write about leadership. You've said
good.
that one little question. So maybe it's something unique to submarine officers. I'm not sure now. Now I'm kind of thinking that we all were brought up a certain way. Then I think it sounds
I always say too, because people, when you leave as a junior officer, you're fairly young. Right. So I'm 31, and sometimes I go into boardroom meetings or larger meetings, and I'm a 31-year-old woman. I have a 4-year-old, you know what I mean? So sometimes I get that, does she really know what's going on? But I always say, from submarining especially, you don't know the fires that we've been forged in, right? You don't know the decisions that we've had to make on a daily basis, the crises that you come across with. How are we going to man? How are we going to, perform? And all the inspections, for goodness sake, that we have.
Right.
And preparing for those and just saying, you see a lot of people get on the defensive about inspections. And you're like, no, this is here to make you better, right? You need this feedback.
Right,
you need to hear it. You need outside, influence. And so, I think it's submariners, we're a unique bunch for sure.
Well, it actually was hard in my career as early on because I had trouble respecting leaders because in my brain, I kept thinking, how many times have you taken a warship to periscope depth?
Yes.
And it's like, you've never done that before? Oh, okay. Then you're trying to tell me what to do. So I actually had trouble in the early days as a young engineer working in corporate America because I had a hard time with respect because I respected our captain, right? He had been in my shoes. He had done everything that I had done and so much more. He was an 06, right? He was, he was like a god. He had done all these great, amazing things. And then I'm working for this guy who he managed a department. He's an engineering manager because he was been an engineer most of his life, right? He hadn't done these really cool, adventurous things and difficult things. And so it was hard in the early days, sort of switching gears and say, okay, all right, maybe he hasn't taken a boat to periscope depth, but he's probably a good guy. I'm going to give him credit.
And he probably, and again, like we talk about, contribution. It's funny if you asked my second XO, if you called him Joe Spinks, call him on the phone right now. You're gonna say, tell me one thing about Stephanie, and he's gonna say she holds her leadership to an excruciatingly high level, a high standard. Nice. I have this vision of what I think leadership should be and what it is not. And I too struggle when I see management, right? When I think it should be leadership. Right. And so I think, in the same vein, it's like, oh, well, you've been here a while, but you haven't seen or done. But then that's part of us reminding ourselves that everybody brings something to the table.
Exactly.
Everybody there's something he can do that I cannot do. And I need his feedback to be successful.
Yes, exactly. No, it's true. So it's really interesting. So we're kind of all cut from the same cloth, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think so.
So my last question for you, and I ask this of all my guests, in your opinion, what are some characteristics of a great leader, a leader worth following?
Okay, so I wrote this down because I think it's like just so important and I didn't want to miss anything. So, okay. Great leader. Here we go. Read it straight off my list. The first thing I put, big bold letters, love for people, right? Love for people. That's number one. I put motivation, right? You have to have if you're going to, be a leader, it's self-motivation, right? Because you're going to come to a place where you're not going to be able, you feel like you are stuck, right? Your team is stuck. There's a challenge. You have to be able to self-motivate and let that permeate to the rest of the group, The next one was vision, forward thinking. I think that in leadership, you never want to be reactive, right? Because you can drive in. When I'm at work, I always use ship driving analogies. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you are over here driving along and there is another ship coming at you. All right. So you're going to maneuver to get out of his way, but you just drove yourself onto the rocks because you're in a channel. Right. So you need to understand a clear picture, a high level picture, and you need to have a vision, a nav plan, right? With maybe succinct outlined, if this happens, then, and you have to cultivate a group that is flexible enough to deal with, when you have a flooding in the engine room, right? Right. You have to be flexible enough to deal with catastrophes. I put communication as a big one. That's a buzzword, I know, but it's not so much. People think they're communicating because they're talking. and that's not what communication is, right? Listening is the biggest part, and people say that, but it's really, really true. You have to cultivate that feedback, and anything you put out has to be clear and concise. So you have to be very clear. A good listener and a good team member. That's the other thing I have on my list. You need to be a good team member, support your team and what their needs are. You need to block for the quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Tell me what you mean by that, though. I understand that because I've been in roles like that where I felt like that was my main role. So what do you say that? So what does that mean?
Yeah. So for me, what I mean is, okay, so I work for a manufacturing company, and we have different functional groups that all bring a piece, right? We have an engineering, we have our processing group, we have our quality group, we have our manufacturing floor, welding, assembling. And so as you're trying to move this product through, because these are custom pieces we build for the Navy, you have to identify early on what the hurdles are going to be. And then you either have to train your team to be able to jump hurdles, or you need to get out there, roll up your sleeves and push the hurdles out of the way. Right. So that's really what I mean is, a good example would be even this pandemic that we have right now, right? That's something that I don't think anyone really knew was coming. But now that it's here, it's okay. How can we keep working? How can we keep our business going? And how can we think about ways to be creative and keep things flowing? Okay, so where are we putting people? Any challenge that they bring to you, and that goes communication, right? Your team has to bring those things that they're seeing so that you can go in and say, nope, we're not doing that. We're doing this, move it in this direction. Does everyone feel good about that decision? Yes. Risks. Okay, let's move forward. So that's really what I mean is just keeping all those day-to-day distractions or problems at bay and making a plan.
So people can carry out the mission. You're blocking for them so they can keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's really good. I love that. So have you written a book yet? Are you thinking about writing a book on leadership? Because you have a lot of really good insight.
Oh, thank you. No, I actually always joke that, I'm an engineer through and through. I can't spell to save my life.
Right.
So
I'm with you.
Writing is a challenge, but I guess, Microsoft Word is probably spell checker is probably
spell check is my friend.
But no, I mean, I hadn't really, I feel like I'm somewhat young in my career, and yes, in Submarine, I've learned so many things, but I feel like I'll continue to learn those things as long as I jot down the things that I'm thinking. Maybe when I get to a certain point in my career, I'll look back and want to put something together. Maybe
so. I'm 52, and that's when I started writing all this stuff down because I realized the submarine life on a submarine really established a really strong foundation of leadership that I've used throughout my whole life. And I realized that in my 50s, wow, I have a really unique experience. And so I wanted to write it down. I wanted to start talking about it. That's why I started this podcast, because I want to talk about it, because you can be a great leader, and leadership, and you've touched on it. Leadership is about relationship. Leadership is about a love of people. It's treating people with respect and being there for them. And I really, it's really interesting. I didn't expect that our conversation would go in that direction, but it's really unique. And I think it's because we started our leadership careers in sort of the tight confines of a submarine at sea, which is a very unique and very special world. And people say, well, you're a military guy, so you must think that, everything is top down. And I'm like, no, I was a submariner. That's a whole different world.
That's right. It's way different. If you've never been called out by a third class petty officer for being wrong, then you probably weren't in submarines.
Right. Exactly. So it's definitely, I tell people we wore the same uniforms, we ate the same food, we had our own quarters, sort of. It's just so tight that everybody was. Yeah. You were in. I was Mr. Renning or Lieutenant Renning for 80 days in a row, and it's just I just wanted to hear my first name. I wanted to get off the boat just to hear my first name again. So
that's right. Right. Yeah.
Well, very good. I really appreciate this. It's been really insightful, and hopefully all of our listeners will pick something up from this. So I really appreciate your time. So thank you.
No, yeah, I thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, like I said, it all kind of happened by accident, and happy accident, I guess. But thank you for having me on, and I'm honored to be your first submarine officer interview. I guess.
Yeah, yes. I think I'm going to have more. So because I think this is really, really good, and it's good to know because you served probably 20 years after me, and it's good to see that. The culture, the way people are led is the same as when I was in. So it's good to see that tradition is kind of strong and still standing strong. It's good to see that.
Oh yeah, Brothers of the Fin, right?
That's Brothers of the Fin, or my first sister of the Fin, right?
That's right.
So that's really neat. I really appreciate you coming on. I really thank you for all your insight. I think it's really good. And so, leaders, if you're listening in, hopefully you gained a lot from her in this discussion we had with Stephanie, especially about leadership being a relationship. I think that's really important. Love of people, taking care of people, having really good communications. Being clear and concise. I think there's a lot of things that you can take away to become a great leader. And really, that's all what this podcast is about, is trying to become a better leader. So thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
All right. Well, that's it for today. So thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.